Hello. Throughout my career, really my life, I've had this curiosity about what makes people tick and how business works. I'm Jacklyn Lane. At Vericent, we aim to have meaningful conversations on topics that leaders and sales folks alike care about and that they want to know more about. So in this What I Wish I Knew series, I'm excited to talk to industry leaders so they can share their experiences and insights with all of you. Today, I have Ryan D'Souza with me. He is a cross-functional leader, and he is touted to be the Advil for business headaches. Focused on growth, creating value and strategy, Ryan has worked with sales and marketing business units. So he's also accumulated a really diverse background of experience with sales organizations, from startup size organizations right up to enterprise. Ryan, I'm thrilled to have you with us today.
So great to be here. And you know what? I'm brand agnostic. So Advil, Tylenol, whatever it is, it works out well. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today we actually have kind of a packed agenda with our three main themes being, we're going to talk about how to minimize the impact of revenue volatility. We've talked a lot about that over the past couple of weeks, Ryan. Some of your experience around why it makes sense to align sales and marketing to optimize growth. And then thirdly, we're going to chat about sales tech stacks and how to identify and implement tools that can help you to grow your business more effectively. So let's start from the top. So what brought you and I together was the fact that you have kind of a tried and true recipe to identify where the volatility in a business is coming from. So can you share with me, regardless of if you're doing a consulting role or if you're at a new organization, what does the first 30 days of this recipe look like?
Sure. And listen, if the recipe was foolproof and tasted great every time, I'd probably be in a different role than I am today. But I think one of the things you learn over time, having been part of a lot of different organizations internally and externally, both running growth teams as well as supporting them from a consulting perspective, is the first 30 days is critical to dive in and understand how the business runs. Obviously, the shape and size of the business and the age and stage the business is at is going to vary. And, 30 days is kind of a circle it on the calendar of hopefully you meet it. But the reality is it could take longer, could be shorter, depending on the complexities of the business. But the first 30 days is really about learning about the people, the processes, and I'm going to call it the politics of how the business runs, because ultimately, how you align with the internal stakeholders is going to be super critical to the success of any endeavor in terms of building your growth engine.
So, as you talk about stakeholders, and I think I might be leading the witness a little here, we talk about some of the biggest barriers you find when you're starting this process. So, you might be a new entrance to the business. Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the biggest barriers and what makes it hard to execute?
Yeah, so I would say from either the internal or external perspective as a consultant, or if you're in the business running the growth team, the CEO and the leader of the organization is obviously the first stage and the first step in understanding what's in front of us in terms of building this growth engine. Is the person suffer from what I like to call Founderitis, where they want to become experts in every single aspect of the business? Because when the business starts, and I have most recently, we work with a ton of startups, and when you're there on day one, you do everything. And then on day 100, you maybe do less. On day 1,000, you do even less. But extricating yourself from what you used to do and what you used to know and how things used to run is often a challenge. And to that respect, within the organization, others that are currently within the growth team, any new person coming in either to help or to join the team would have, I would call it, territoriality around what they're doing to this point. So in general, if I'm joining a business, either to run the organization from a growth perspective or as a consultant, it's because there's something that's not running at the optimal level, which means it's not necessarily a people issue, but that's the first thing that happens internally is the defense mechanisms go up and it's like, whoa, I'm really good at my job. I have lots of experience. How am I going to work with this person who's going to basically been brought in to point out all the things we're doing wrong? And I think that's obviously, I wouldn't say it's a barrier. It's literally life as a growth leader in any aspect. And those on the call that are growth leaders and have joined new organizations would definitely agree with me on that one.
Right. So, it sounds like getting in and starting to, if it's not a true barrier, kind of breaking down some of the roadblocks or some of the defense mechanisms that people have up there is the first piece. So, really building and creating trust that you're not there to move people out of their jobs or tell them what they're doing wrong. You're there to improve the way things are going.
That's right.
So it's the first thing to do, kind of build that trust and credibility internally.
Absolutely. And you often see when you get there, everyone's ridiculously busy with too many things happening. Their calendars are too booked. And if you can be kind of, like I said before, the pain relief for the organizational issues, that's helpful in positioning yourself as an extra set of hands and an extra brain to relieve some of the pressures, to maybe make those to-do lists a little bit shorter, either through improved process, potentially software, things like that, or putting people in the right spot. Sometimes it's not the person, it's they're in the wrong job. And I think that's an important piece to look at as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have this kind of idea of a consultant coming in, and a lot of the time it is about kind of redeploying people or, I always have this assumption, and perhaps a bunch of other people do, that it's really about kind of leaning out the organization from a headcount perspective, which can be scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think with some firms, that's what comes with it. It's like, oh no, they're preparing us for some type of transaction or some type of investor relations project. So it does sometimes look that way. But for the most part, I think that first 30 days is where you can establish, to go kind of tie back to that original question, is that's where you establish your credibility to help. So establishing your credibility as a helper, whether you're coming in as the, chief revenue officer or growth officer, or if you're coming in to help as a consultant.
So when we lean into the volatility piece, where are some of the areas where you'd normally shine a spotlight on, across sales, marketing, or the business?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some hot spots or kind of the low hanging fruit for you to identify that you can kind of quick wins.
Well, listen, for anyone listening out there, you don't need a consultant to do this. You can do it internally in your business. And essentially I do a microscopic examination of the customer journey from the time of first brand touch and brand exposure all the way through to building customer advocates through customer success. If you look at I call them conversion points across the entire journey, and you see what you've got. Is it a person? Is it a process? Is it a piece of software? Is that conversion point optimized? And you basically go along that journey. You look at it and you go, hey, when a customer is first exposed to our prospect, is first exposed to our brand, is there brand confusion? Are they clear on what it is? Like, those are the types of questions that you can ask, and those answers will tell you what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Next point, first point of conversion. If someone's showing interest, how do we convert them? What's their first touch point in our business? Is it automated? Is it a human? Is that human experience the right one? Are they incented the right way to ensure the customer's journey is optimized? And you can go all the way along through to they're onboarded and they're a customer now. What is your frequency of touch points post-close that enables them to become advocates, shouting from the street that, hey, Hilltops, hey, this company I work with is awesome. Everybody should work with them.
So it's interesting, right? Because the second piece we were going to talk about was, you, through conversations, you've shared with me that you have often suggested that sales and marketing should work together. When you talk about the customer journey, it's not the way that a lot of sales leaders would talk about the customer journey, because according to a sales leader, the customer journey begins at, your first appointment or the business development rep through to signing the deal, the end. So talk to me a little bit about your philosophy. You actually said, you can't have a predictable revenue engine unless you tie sales and marketing together. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, my experience, what I've seen is when you have siloed approaches to the customer journey, it can create friction in that customer's experience. And that translates into internal friction. And I see it every day. And the reality is, when you have functional groups like sales, like marketing, like success, reporting into a CEO, they're not focused just on growth. They're focused on a number of different areas of the business, as they should be. When you have them unified under a growth leadership, that person's everyday, the reason they get up in the morning and their 24/7 drive is the growth of the business from a revenue and customer perspective. And so that generally has created less silos, more unification. And it's almost like you have a journey owner and that customer journey owner versus having people that own pieces of the journey and expecting the CEO or the president to meld those together to create a unified approach is sometimes difficult. It can happen, and it obviously has happened traditionally for years, but that's why there's this, historical, thought process around sales versus marketing. Is it exists because of that exact thing where you've got multiple points of contact into a CEO who's not only focused on the sales, revenue growth, and the health, building a healthy growth engine, focused on everything, and it's harder. Your focus is just diluted.
Well, I think that's a really interesting perspective. I love the customer journey owner. I think that's such a cool idea. And I have to say, you come up with these things that I write down. It's like Founderitis and territorialism, and I'm kind of loving the Ryanisms. Give you one of those, but I agree. I think that every organization has a company-wide goal, and the company-wide goal will be growth. It will be profit margin. It will be EBITDA, whatever the company goal is. And then the goals get disseminated across departments, and sometimes the goals conflict, right? And so, when you think about a customer service, like if you think about a call center, maybe they're rewarded on the number of calls that they can get through in a certain period of time, versus other call centers are rewarded on concluding or resolving the issue. So they're two very different metrics. Similarly, if a sales rep is rewarded on volume, then that's a very different metric than if they're rewarded on quantity of value.
Yeah.
So similarly, I can imagine there's the same kind of conflict across marketing and sales.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of leading into really the foundation of building a predictable growth engine is making sure you have the right org structure. So you have the right org structure is number one, making sure you have the right people in the right spots across the journey, making sure they're compensated in the right way to drive the behaviors that are going to provide the customer with the best journey possible. And then the third piece would be making sure there's alignment across all of those things as to what it is we're trying to do. So shared goals is a big part of it. I'm a huge proponent of introducing variable compensation for everyone that touches the customer journey. So marketers that have worked on teams that I've run have got variable compensation, which is generally not something that's done when it's tied to the overall results. So instead of tying marketing to just lead generation metrics, you tie them to end goal metrics. Like, hey, you guys own churn as well. You guys own acquisition. So that way, everybody's focused on the same thing. And aligning comp plans is a big deal. So I think those are hugely important pieces.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting take, and I think that's always the goal, right? So we've been doing a lot of ruminating about how to ensure our customers feel more connected in the way that they're disseminating their high level goals down. Sometimes there is a disconnect there. And in some of the ways that companies are looking to control volatility, a big part of it is actually, how do we lean into technology when we start to make these decisions? So, we talked about people in the right place doing the right thing. We talked about processes, tightening them up and understanding where there's too much. And the third piece, people, process, technology is tech. So on average, a sales department has about 7 technologies to improve their performance. So we talked a little bit about in other conversations how, sometimes companies just keep the tech that they've always had and they have a potpourri, another Ryanism, of technology. What's the best way for a sales organization to leverage tech?
Yeah. So great question. And I think, after org design, people in the right spots, alignment, giving them the proper tools to, kick butt at their job is where the tech piece comes in. And I think what's oftentimes a very last add to someone's org chart is someone to own kind of, sales operations or growth operations. I've recently started to add, the title of growth ops to my orgs, because you need someone who can unify the tech stacks of all the different pieces that touch the customer. You see it all the time across organizations where marketing uses one piece of tech, sales uses another piece for CRM, and then you might even have a separate piece of software for customer success to use. And ultimately, what ends up happening is, depending on where the customer is in the journey, the type of communication, the style of the communication, it can be different. Their experience can look and feel different, and that's not ideal. And so I would say the biggest thing you do is hire somebody who's an expert across or owns all of the technology. Right now, each of the functional owners generally own it. So VP marketing owns the marketing tech stack. Yep. VP sales owns the sales tech stack, and so on and so forth. So unifying that's important. The second piece is optimizing what you've got before you add something to try and plug a hole. Generally, what will happen is people will try to, and newer businesses do this more often than legacy businesses, is they solve a problem with technology. So they try to basically go, oh, we've got something broken. Oh, there's a cool software that's relatively inexpensive that if we bolt in, it'll solve that. A great example is, time to first touch for Elite. There's lots of different softwares out there that basically, you open your laptop and everything's right there for you. You don't even have to think, and, there's no art left. It's just science, and you just go for it. But oftentimes they bolt that into a CRM before they've even optimized what the CRM can do on its own out of the box. Uh-huh. And so it doesn't mean you won't need that eventually. It just means every piece of software is the right time, right place. And you might get them too soon, which means you're, again, complicating your entire tech stack, and there's no one owner. So, who's going to be the admin and own this? Who's going to be the expert? No one will really be the expert. The person that knows the most ends up by default becoming the expert, but they might only know the 50% of what's actually required to be a full-time admin of that software. So I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah. And, I think about Salesforce as an example. Everybody has their snippet of the part of Salesforce that they know. Even the administrator knows such a small fraction because Salesforce has so many capabilities. Not trying to plug Salesforce, but here we are.
No free ads.
So, when we think about making sure that you optimize what you currently have before buying new stuff, stuff is a technical word. What tools have you found are most useful in identifying the parts of sales or the go-to-market organization that might be out of control?
Yeah. So I would say the majority of the time, and I don't like using absolutes, so the majority of the time, it's at the top of the funnel where it's broken the most. So lead intake, data cleansing, and that first touch kind of entry into the sales funnel. I've never joined an organization or helped an organization that doesn't have a data problem. And the data problem in terms of cleanliness, duplicates, all these sorts of issues, because out of the box, most people just plug something in and turn it on. And they're like, oh, you know what? I don't really need the deduplicating software right out of the gate. We're not big enough yet. And those mistakes end up compounding and costing you way more later on. So, cleansing 200,000 records is way more expensive than paying up front for something to keep your data under control. So, not that it's about investing, but I think investing in the right technology is super important. And if it's things that a human doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in order to optimize it, that's perfect. That's perfect. If it's just this can replace a spreadsheet. I mean, tracking commissions, doing things like that, compensation tracking, again, is a spreadsheet-driven exercise for most startups, when there's tons of great software out there that can do that for you and free up time to do more, I call them revenue-generating or growth-generating activities of your people. So when you've got a finite budget, you want your people doing revenue-generating things. Software doesn't do revenue-generating things. It helps people do revenue-generating things.
Yeah, I really liked what you said there in terms of, find technology that can make things easier without the person having to be an expert. Because I think there's lots of functions within an organization. Someone truly does need to be a master of, or, an expert in that particular function. But then there's a whole bunch of little stuff that happens underneath that can be done without human intervention. So I love the data example, like could not be more timely considering everyone's talking data, and data has been a problem for many years for lots of companies. So tying up, firstly, I want to say thank you for your insight. I think there's some really cool tidbits there. There were 3 key pieces that I took out of there. One, I don't think that you can ever underplay how important culture is. And it could be very different based on the size of organization. But, I already said Founderitis, or even, a particular expert, they don't necessarily want to let go of control. So understanding the culture before you get in and kind of stomp all over the flowers. The second piece was getting into the customer journey. And I really love the idea of a customer journey owner as a part of, even if sales and marketing aren't one function, to have someone who manages what that journey looks like throughout, to me, super cool idea. And the third one was, having a tighter control on organizational structural alignment. So making sure that those goals from the top level are shared as you trickle down, and then having someone who manages tech, like the growth ops role you mentioned, to manage tech for the sales organization. So those were my 3 takeaways. I think I could have just regurgitated most of the stuff we talked about because I thought it was super valuable. So thank you.
Of course.
So we're just going to move on to one of my favorite sections, which is called Quick Questions. Are you ready? What piece of advice for a new seller should they ignore?
I learned this one the hard way. So, you don't want to pay any attention to those that don't have a look in the mirror first mentality when it comes to their results. New person joins a sales team, everyone's going to be giving them different advice, and someone will say, oh, if the product just had this doohickey, we would crush it. Don't worry. I would have hit my target last week if my leads were better. That stuff will literally pollute your ability to be successful. So it's kind of a ignore others that don't have that mentality, but it's reverse is make sure you have a look in the mirror mentality yourself as well.
I love it. I love that. I think it's great. I'm not supposed to be giving you feedback. I'm supposed to be asking you questions. One of my favorite questions to ask people generally, especially people who landed in sales, is when you were asked as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I've got older siblings, and they were all kind of medical related. So, dentist, hygienist stuff. So I thought I was going to end up being a doctor of some sort, but no, way smarter, got into business. So
different life for sure.
Different life.
So what was your first job?
My first job was actually delivering flyers way back when they weren't through Canada Post for a little Italian restaurant in the neighborhood I grew up in. Nice. So door-to-door flyers with the specials and little cutout coupons, and I got paid in pizza. So it was amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to ask about the ingredients of a productive sales culture, although you probably know the ingredients of a wicked pizza. But what are the 3 ingredients of a productive sales culture?
I would say motivation, inspiration, and customer journey obsession. Those are the 3 that I would say. If you've got those, you're miles ahead.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I've got the order wrong because my next question is, what was your favorite meal of all time?
My favorite meal of all time is very specific, and anybody who's listening or may listen to this at some time has talked to me ever knows this answer already too, but it's probably a 16-ounce filet with veggies, tons of veggies, and a massive bottle of red wine. That would be good for me.
That I think is now officially my favorite meal. So I think I know the answer to this question already. If you had $500 to spend on anything, what would it be? It would be that meal. But if it wasn't that,
exactly. Well, the favorite meal would be if it was free, so then I wouldn't need to spend it on that. But I would take that $500 and turn it into way more by incenting my growth team to deliver results. So I would use it as an incentive to someone in something.
Oh, clever, clever. The old growth mindset, not a pair of sneakers.
Yeah, turn 5 into 50,000. That's the move.
Nice. Hey, very last question in the spirit of what I wish I knew. What are you most curious about? What do you wish you knew more about?
Yeah, that's an easy one. In the post-COVID world we live in, one of the things that I'm still trying to find the formula for, and if I do, I'll let you guys know if we do another podcast, but it's how to optimize training and education in a remote environment. It's so hard when we click leave meeting or somebody exits this podcast to be like, oh, did they get it? What did they retain? How can you measure if they're putting things into action before it's too late? So for sales leaders and training folks out there, it's been tough in a post-COVID world to, hire, retain, and train great talent. And I think it's driven part of that great resignation we've seen, which is people aren't getting trained enough to be successful at some of their roles. So you're seeing a lot more attrition, a lot more transient roles happening, a lot more attrition for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that time where you used to finish a meeting or finish a sales call, that 10 minutes it took you to get from the meeting room to the front door, that's the time when you get the juice. And similar
For
to
sure.
meetings, right?
Well, and listen, the human connection is really hard. I mean, we're awesome at it right now, you and I, but I mean, the reality is it's really hard through a screen to connect with somebody. And that's what we're asking everyone to do. And that human connection is a big deal. Body language, you can't see what's happening, the dual screen ability to just multitask. Although I doubt anyone watching this is going to do anything else because they'll be riveted to the content. But the reality is that's what happens. And so how do you help people learn, get better? How do you train on new products? How do you drive adoption of new technology when you're, in your living room talking to someone in their living room?
Yeah, I hear you. And I think a lot of people would be curious to know that if there was a recipe or a magic bullet for that.
Yeah. No, working on it.
Let me know. Maybe that's our next topic.
For sure.
So we've talked about just a ton of stuff today, and really the tip of the iceberg of what we could talk about in terms of how to manage volatility within an organization. We started out by talking about how you get in there and you understand that culture, and building trust and respect are really important parts when you're first starting to understand what's creating volatility. We talked about an alternative about bringing sales and marketing together to really kind of drive that customer journey mindset. And then finally, we talked about how to optimize the sales tech stack so that you are doing the most with what you have rather than filling plugs. I've already told you my 83 favorite key takeaways, but I want to say a big giant thank you. I've learned a lot today, and I hope people who are listening and watching have as well. So thanks so much, Ryan.
You're very welcome. Look forward to working together again.
Amazing. Have a good one. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.